Now, I've been playing Sorare for the last 5 seasons, and I spend a lot of time talking to brand new players that have just opened up their account and getting their teeth stuck into it, as well as those managers that have been around the block once or twice and know a thing or two about a thing or two. But with the MLS season that just completed, I have never had so many messages in my time on Sorare about people already asking, Quinny, how do I prepare for MLS 2025? How do I get a MLS stack together? What clubs should I look at? What are the things I need to know about MLS before getting stuck into it? And I really can't believe the foresight and the forward planning that so many managers are trying to do with one of the most difficult leagues to forecast and to plan ahead for that there is in world football with the MLS. In the video today, this is the How to MLS video on Sorare, where we're going to talk about all the things that you need to know if you're new to MLS, what to look forward to in terms of the new season, different things we're going to try and earmark and watch out for, as well as all the kind of top tips and do's and don'ts and all that kind of thing that I've had on Sorare playing with MLS cards. MLS first came onto Sorare in 2020, maybe about 2 months after I just joined the platform. And prior to me playing Sorare, I was a bit of an MLS fan anyway. You know, I've supported New York City since they were formed. And, you know, with my dad's American, I've got family that live in Spokane. Closest place to them is Seattle, which, you know, you could probably work out. Another club in America that I've always kind of, you know, had close tabs on. I've always had, oh, well, that's kind of my family's local club, as it were. And no matter what the game structure has been on Sorare in terms of the competitions, the regions, the divisions and all that kind of stuff that have evolved over the last couple of years, MLS just has so many opportunities for so many Sorare scouts and managers, no matter what your budget is, no matter what level of card you're playing with. So at any point in the video today, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, because some of the MLS stuff will make you laugh, I promise, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And if you are a Sorare manager that's been around the block once or twice, maybe you're a bit of an MLS aficionado, get into the comment section. I want to see your top tips and tricks for preparing for MLS 2025. And yeah, let's just get stuck straight into it. Because for a video like this, we have a little bit of admin, we have a little bit of housekeeping, just to make sure as we go into the rest of the video and we're referencing some stuff, you guys are, you know, up to speed with really the dynamics in this league, or I was going to say division there, but this league is actually broken into 2 divisions, or conferences as they call it, the East and the West. Now, last season there was 29 clubs in total, so we had 15 clubs in the Eastern Conference and only 14 clubs in the Western Conference. Now, this meant in MLS 2024, there was actually 1 club every week that was spare, had no fixture, had the week off, and for Sorare teams that is a nightmare. But this coming season, San Diego FC is the newest MLS expansion club that will come in to the Western Conference, which means there'll be 2 leagues now of 15 each. Now that means 2 things. Number 1, we're not going to have blank weeks for any MLS clubs anymore. And number 2, every team is now going to play 2 games more. As you can see, over the regular season, every team played 34 matches. And the way it works is you're going to play every team within your conference, home and away. But America's a pretty big place, you might have noticed this. And with there being 30 teams in total, you're not going to play everyone home and away. So the teams from the other conference go on a kind of rotation of home and away. So if you played somebody at home this season from the other conference, next season you'll play them away if you actually get a match against them, because again, you won't face everyone in the other conference throughout the regular season. Now, the reason this is important to kind of hit on quite early in the video is there's a few reasons why this is important. It's obviously good for you to know, of course, but both these conferences have got totally different strengths and weaknesses, and the eventual winners of each conference normally have a different kind of hallmark that presents themselves. Traditionally, the Western Conference, the big power teams in there generally are the big power teams overall. You know, we can see at the top of the table here, we've got LAFC and eventual MLS Cup winners, LA Galaxy, as well as the likes of the Seattle Sounders, and another kind of clutch of teams here that have been quite formidable over the years. Generally, in my experience, the Western Conference has had those bigger stars, those higher scoring teams, whether it be goals or SO5 points. And maybe Inter Miami has changed that in terms of how the Eastern Conference looks, but generally speaking, the teams that do so well in the Eastern Conference generally have much better squad construction. They've normally got a really, you know, established management team, established kind of, you know, style of play. the philosophy, that kind of thing. And it's quite clear to see here when we look at the Eastern Conference, there's only 2 teams that didn't lose 10 or more matches, in Inter Miami and Columbus. Whereas when we look at the Western Conference, there's 4 teams that have lost 10 games or less. And the reason I bring that up in terms of the losses being an important statistic to look out for here is MLS doesn't generally have overly dominant teams. You know, there is so many teams that are like level pegging with each other. Never mind the travel kind of being a bit of a leveler. Home field advantage is very much a thing in MLS. And when it comes to the construction of the league and the fixtures, we don't have the fixtures for next season at point of recording, but one thing you will need to be looking for if you want to be that extra level of Moneyball, really trying to scope out the strategy and all the rest of it, is looking at those cross-conference matches. You know, how many times do they have to travel east or west? When do they do it? Is it concurrently? Is it spread throughout the year? Are they actually got more home games against other conference teams than they do away matches? And also the Canadian teams kind of fall into this in a funny way. We've got Vancouver, we've got Toronto and Montreal. Now the Canadian teams have got the most travel of anyone else in MLS because they're coming from the north as well as going east and west and all the rest of it as well. And generally, I know this from having a Ryan Gauld at Vancouver, but generally speaking, the Canadian teams, some other teams can have this in MLS as well. They get stretches of fixtures where they're at home and when they're at away. And again, when the fixture list comes out, this is a very important thing to be aware of. If you haven't started playing MFL, there's a link in the description of this video that will get you started up with all the beginner bonus stuff you're going to need to open up your squad and get your squad built as soon as possible. And there's never been a better time to form your club and do those preparations, as it's all eyes on preparation for Season 2. The registration window opens in a couple of days and the season kicks off in a week or 2 from now. So plenty of opportunity to get into the game, start to figure out, learn the ropes and start to build that squad, get registered and be able to compete in Season 2 against other MFL managers just like me. If you do get stuck, if you've got any questions, jump into the comment section and I'll come and sort you out. By clicking on that link, you do directly support me and all the content here. So if you are going to play MFL, please click on the link that's in the description of my video. It really means a lot to me. And like I say, if you get stuck or you need a hand, I'll come and help you out. And when you're planning for the full season ahead, every MLS Sorare manager is thinking about playoffs. Can this team get into the playoffs and get you those Brucey extra bits of utility where they play extra matches in the playoffs in an effort to go on and win the MLS Cup itself? If we have a look at the Western Conference here, you needed 47 points or more to qualify for the playoffs. But in the Eastern Conference, that was 40 points. It was actually split on goal difference, as you can see here, between Atlanta United and DC United. The next thing we're going to touch on really quickly is the transfer policy structure that MLS has. MLS is more, if you're a European football fan or South American or whatever, MLS is more the club than the league in actual fact, because all the players are centrally contracted for the most part. The individual teams will top up wages and have their own deal with the players for how much they'll pay them for wins and goals and all the rest of it. But generally speaking, MLS is the overarching controller on, what players can move to certain clubs. If you remember when Wayne Rooney moved to MLS, he really wanted to go to one of the marquee clubs. But the way American sports are generally worked kind of ties into the way MLS is structured, that when Wayne Rooney wanted to come to the MLS, all of the marquee teams had already had designated players, DPs, the guys get paid mega money, in their books already, and the last batch of star names from Europe had already went to the likes of Orlando's and LA's and all the nice climates that they want to live in. So when Rooney was coming to go to MLS, same with Schweinsteiger going to Chicago Fire, if you remember that, Wayne Rooney had DC United as basically his. That's the team you have to go to, pal. So when you hear about a marquee player maybe being on the cusp of moving to MLS, it can be really difficult to try and work out, what club they could actually eventually end up in, because there's so much in the water with it that they could end up in a number of different places. The weird transfer structure or policy, or whatever you want to think of it as, has already been kind of demonstrated in this post-season session. Thiago Andrade, who's an MLS Cup winner for New York City, had been sent out on loan because he wanted to make a bigger move. He was a highly valued Brazilian, talent, and he was looking to get back into Brazilian football. Never really worked out for him, and they went on loan to China. It's a pretty crap team. It didn't work out too well for him, but he's still contracted by NYC, still contracted by MLS, and in the expansion draft, which we won't go into in much detail, but because there's a new club coming in, all the players that are kind of out of contract with the club but still contracted within MLS can be drafted by the new club to build their roster, to build their squad for the first time. And in that expansion draft, San Diego drafted Thiago Andrade, who's a very, well-decorated player in MLS. But as soon as they drafted him, they'd already organised a deal to trade him to Toronto FC in exchange for a bit of money and another draft pick in a different draft. And the reason I'm highlighting this is to make you aware that if you do see a marquee player from Europe or whatever looking to move to MLS, or the rumours are circulating he's going to move to MLS, you won't really know what club it is until the negotiations are at the sharp end of it, number one. And number two, any incumbent player you have in MLS could move anywhere at any time when the window's open, of course. Because in that true American sport kind of hallmark, costume, whatever you want to think of it as, it's all about leveling the playing field so that every game is as competitive as possible and not one team, and we're starting to see maybe some teams like Miami's and LA's and whatever maybe start to pull away from the pack a little bit because of all the extra external financing and support that these clubs seem to have with them. But for the large part, the teams that are weaker get first draft picks and, all that kind of stuff. So if you have a player at a team right now and you think, this guy's never moving to Europe, he's not that good and he's not going to go to South America or China or anything like that, this guy's going to be staying in MLS. That could be very true, but you could buy a guy for Seattle and he ends up in Houston or Salt Lake or New York or whatever. These things can happen, and they probably will happen all the way until registration window closes. Okay, now on to the SO5 stuff, okay? Now, as we've seen when we looked at the table there, and you probably gathered this already from any research you might have done, is that there is no dominant force in MLS consistently season on season, week after week. It's just not the way the division works. Sure, Miami, Messi, they're going to be up there all the time. You can kind of feel it, and again, you can look at some strong squads, LA, Galaxy, a lot of these other places, and you can see, they're going to do really well. And because the threshold for qualification to the playoffs for those big teams is so low, you can almost guarantee some postseason action out of them. But because the playing field is so level, we have a lot of problems in constructing the perfect stack, the perfect balance in a purely MLS setting. If we look at the goalkeepers here on screen from last year, you can see none of them are clean sheet machines. None of them are dominant goalkeepers in the division itself. And we see this all across world football, that there will generally be a team that's super good at clean sheets, very good defensively, and end up quite close to the table. MLS doesn't have anything like that going on. Now, it must be said, some of these goalkeepers are good, are fine, maybe always do better at home than they do away or whatever. But generally speaking, a lot of these goalkeepers will let you down. They will break your heart on occasion. And you do really pay for quality when it comes to MLS goalkeepers. Guys that are cheap for a reason, and the guys that are more expensive, it's a very fair economy, it feels like, in SO5 on Sorare for the MLS goalkeepers. You do get some nice ones as well. Guys like Pedro Gallese, who also plays for Peru. He's the Peru #1 or whatever as well. Andre Blake plays for Jamaica. And we've got Canadian internationals, American internationals. There's a few keepers here that are pretty handy. But for the most part, these goalkeepers are all just as good as each other. Every week, they've got the potential to do a good score or do a bad score. It's a real lottery. It's a real dice roll here. And although, especially if you've been around the block a little bit this season with Sorare, if you're a new-ish player, a lot of people will look at the goalkeeper as the catalyst to then go and build a defensive stack around. And really, for me, the goalkeeper, as well as your potential captain picks that we'll come to in a second, really need to be standalone picks where it's just I think that goalkeeper is really, really good, or I think that team is not going to concede as much as a lot of the other teams in MLS this year. And for me, over the last couple of seasons, Kalina has been a fantastic goalkeeper option. Generally, I've been a fan of Dane St. Clair as well. I'm a big fan of Matt Fries, the NYC goalkeeper. He's been getting better and better. Carlos Coronel, the Paraguay #1 international goalkeeper, is also a very handy player, as well as Roman Burki, who I think is, along with Kalina, probably up there for me as the safest hands in the league in terms of if you were to buy a card and set and forget him every week in your team. Burki and Kalina would be up there for me with the top ones. Alongside Hugo Lloris, who's actually getting assists this season at the ripe old age of 37 for the World Cup winner. So there's goalkeepers of all shapes and sizes here, but this is a you get what you pay for situation, and be prepared for them to break your heart. Now, I think in this post-season period, no matter whether you're planning on building a classic MLS strategy or team, or you're doing some early preparations to get in on the in-season action when the new cards come out for early access in 2025, a classic goalkeeper is going to be in almost everyone's menu. It's always going to be something that you can make use of, and will help you field some more teams. So even in this period now, if you're an in-season player, IDing some of those top goalkeepers that get that off-season discount on the market is definitely something I would be open to and be keeping an eye on in the market. But the absolute opposite, I'm going to say for defence, because some of the better defenders that are on page here, Kai Wagner is almost certainly moving to Europe. This Carlos Garces here, he only played towards the back end of the season. Maybe he's a prominent star for next year. But really outside of that, almost every one of these other defenders are really flaky and might not do as well next season as they did this. And Jordi Alba at the age of 35 is maybe a contender for that. Yaimar Andrade, who for me has been one of the most steady centre-backs SO5-wise in the league, is now 32, getting a little bit older. And really outside of that, as I scan across the defence here, Walker Zimmerman has been an all-star player for Nashville at 31. He's pretty, you can see what you get from Walker Zimmerman, of course. And there's plenty of other players here who are fine, who are pretty consistent and everything else. But if the team changes around that defence, the manager changes, maybe they trade in amongst the league, maybe a new defender comes in from Europe and maybe replaces some of these guys, because none of them are that stellar where they couldn't be replaced. So I think for defence, it's definitely a position, even if you're looking to buy classic, I would be really holding off for right now. Because we've already spoke about how mental some of the transfers can be from within MLS. But this window is going to be open all the way to the back end of February into March. And so many of these clubs will make unexpected transfers. And it's not just from the top leagues in European football, but I'm looking at Ligue 2, the second tier in France. A lot of players from there come over to the MLS into America, as well as we're seeing more and more now the likes of Kevin Denke, a very prominent goal scorer in the Belgian league, got his team into the Conference League, is playing Conference League football for them this year, and he's moving over to MLS now for a good couple of quid. So with how active MLS clubs are in talent ID and player acquisition, there's not many squads that you could rest on their laurels and go, oh, that defence is set, or that defence is already built, and build your defensive stack around that. The defender for me is probably one of the last players you want to be picking up, because number one, so many of them are very much nondescript from one another. They're all just as capable as each other for the most part. The good players and the good teams is scoring as well. There's very few dominant ones. So it's something that I don't think the egg timer's upside down for. Defence is something you can definitely figure out even as the season pans out. Who steps up, who emerges into the new club, or in the absence of someone else who's left, to become a main defender, a main star. And midfield kind of lies somewhere in between what we've just said about the goalkeepers and what we've just said with the defence, because almost every MLS club, any good one, has a really good midfielder in it or two. Guys that are the designated players, the DPs, the guys that they pay mega money to. The star, the poster child of that this year was Ricky Puig, the Barcelona Youth Academy graduate, aspiring wonder kid who made the move from Barca straight to LA Galaxy. He was a major part in their success this year. He had an Achilles tendon injury, or an ACL or MCL, I forget which one, but he's out for ages, and his price is going to be down at the moment as a result, so he might be a really good one to pick up on injury discount. But as you look at this list here, every one of these players plays for a different team. Puig at Galaxy, Evander at Portland, Hartel is at St. Louis, etc, etc. But there's actually a few of these players, and this is why it's kind of in between the defence and the goalkeeper, because Facundo Torres is on his way to Palmeiras in Brazil. Ache or Hector Herrera, he's on his way back to Liga MX, Liga Mexico. So no matter if they're 23, 24 and they're an exciting prospect, or they're 34, they're kind of over the hill, they're past their peak, and maybe this is the biggest pay, the biggest contract they're going to get towards the back end of their season. No one is safe. Liga MX can still pay some pretty competitive wages against MLS, and for some of those younger players, maybe moving back to Argentina and Brazil for half a season or whatever can help springboard them back into Europe, or into Europe in the first place. Guys like Carlos Gil, Albert Rusnak, who are kind of in with the paintwork now in MLS. I'd even say someone like Alexei Miranchuk, who is quite a recent arrival in MLS, similar to Marcel Hartel here. Some of those guys are a bit safer and a bit more reliable, but I don't really think anyone is that reliable. Carlos Gil could easily just move to Mexico or Spain or whatever. He's been in MLS for a number of years, and the Revs are on a bit of a decline since the highs that they had in recent years. Guys like Ryan Gauld seem pretty committed to the cause, and we could talk about so many of these midfielders here on a number of different reasons, but midfield is an area that you need to get a good understanding of and try your best to try and find some of those safer picks, like a Miranchuk, like a Gauld, like a Rusnak, a Hartel. I don't know if Evander's that safe, it's hard to say, that you can have in your team as a foundational card that is like, he could be my classic captain to help my in-season team, or if you're building classic anyway, he is a captain capable card for me. So midfield midfield is an area you're going to need to spend money on compared to defence. Certainly, defenders are dirt cheap by comparison. But it's a guy that has to be, you could put the captain's armband on, a guy that plays every week, is maybe a main set piece taker for his club. And if they do have a track record in MLS, that makes it a little bit easier. But there's also going to be a lot of incoming transfers in this window that could be really good prospects. And I think this opens up one of two windows that I would want you to be mindful of and perhaps try and take advantage of. Emil Forsberg moved into the New York Red Bulls midway through the season. And if you picked up an in-season Leipzig card for Emil Forsberg, that card would still be in-season coming in to the MLS season that he played in, So in this transfer window, we're in the middle of a European season and South American and whatever else that has in-season cards. So if we do get any in-season cards transferred into MLS, some of those cards will be really good to snipe up with. But if you look at Emil Forsberg, it's not always smooth sailing for these guys because sometimes they hit the ground running, sometimes they're in and out the team. The travel is it's a really hard thing to quantify if you're not American, you don't live in America, you've not been there, or you're not an MLS player. The extensive travel and their routine. I don't know what the word is I'm trying to say here. And how players can get injured. They might not adapt, they might not settle that quickly. And yeah, like Forsberg certainly had a nice purple patch early on arrival here, which is great to see. But so many players do struggle to get up to speed right away. So it can be one of those ones that fools rush in, but also it can be one of those ones that early bird catches the worm. Because if you get an Emil Forsberg who cannot get a game for Leipzig for a couple of quid, and then he goes to the New York Red Bulls and he's the main guy, centre of the team, takes all the set pieces, then it can be a really good clutch player to have brought in. So midfielders transferring in and out is very much something that right now, if you're interested in playing MLS 2025, you need to have your finger on the pulse with, and you don't want to be spending your full budget on this top 10. Just go and buy them, and then you see 2 or 3 of them leave, and 1 or 2 of them are worse this year than last year. Somebody new comes in, and you'd have maybe really rather them, but you missed the opportunity because you spent your wallet too quickly. So the sliding doors, the musical chairs that we get in midfield, designated players, DPs, is something that if you're new to MLS, you really need to keep your finger on the pulse with. And it's a very similar dynamic when it comes to forwards. But as we looked at with the league tables in MLS before, there is lots of goals in MLS for the most part. The problem can be sometimes that you're picking a guy in a team where the goals are spread out. They've not got that dominant focal point striker that is going to get 3/4 of the goals, or if he doesn't get 3/4 of the goals, he's involved in 3/4 of them by maybe making assists or whatever. And you can then go, well, if that team has a great fixture, he will be involved in the goals. And the top players on this list were those guys. Guys like Messi, Peck, Cucho, Benteke even, is some of these other names that are maybe a little bit lesser known to anyone that's kind of new to MLS or whatever. But the forward position is one that you cannot get wrong, because the forwards in this league, in this category, never mind, MLS, I think there's a little bit of speculation that it might get its own in-season competition like the Premier League does. I don't think you can hold your breath on that or really plan as if that will happen. So the majority of competition you're going to get in MLS, when it's the summer, it's MLS only in Brazil, so that's kind of fine. But if you're to start getting them now for the early season when MLS comes back, you're still going to have the Europeans to deal with. And then at the back end of the MLS season, all the Europeans come back into that Challenger region to be competitive. And one of the things that separates MLS players on Sorare, MLS stacks from the European teams, is that some of the forwards can be power forwards. They can smash in goals regularly. It's very forecastable, very predictable, and the right ones can score mega points. So again, as much as there might be some guys down here, like a Joveljic, a Buanga, for example, who maybe are misrepresented in this table, Joseph Pancil, guys that are like really formidable and can be really good. This isn't a position to go cheap on and try and find a budget guy and go, oh yeah, I'll go and buy this guy because he plays every game and maybe he'll score a goal, maybe he'll get an assist, because the competition you're going to be against will have Pancil, they will have Insigne, they will have Buanga, Joveljic, Suarez, Benteke, Cucho, Peck, Messi. They'll have these guys, and if you're going to give them that much of a head start on you in the forward category, you're dead in the water already. You need a guy. If you've not got it in midfield, well, you kind of need it in midfield, but up front, you need a guy that can get to 10 to 15 goals and get a decent amount of assists in amongst that. And again, there's an established list here. There's a track record here for some of these guys. Peck maybe leaves, so picking him up is maybe a bit dangerous. Suarez has got no knees. Messi's a year older. Benteke's probably a decent shout to repeat his performances because he's a bit of a one-man effort, as it were. But outside of that, so many of these players could rise up the ranks. Some new faces could come in and disappoint, or get the cat in amongst the pigeons here and really disrupt the natural order. But forward and midfield, of all the positions that we've looked at in MLS, are the two positions that you need to pay up for. They are the two positions that you need absolute quality in if you're going to be competitive. And the way I would recommend any Sorare player, new or old, aspiring to play MLS to approach this is very simply have a look at both the divisions from last season, go through some of the results if you've got the time. Can you look at the squad construction and have a look at 2 to 3 squads that look interesting, look exciting to you? Maybe they appointed a new manager halfway through the season. Maybe somebody they signed last year started to get a bit of form towards the back end of the year and maybe could have a better year next year. And once you've found 2 or 3 of those clubs kind of earmarked aside, you then just want to play the waiting game like we've mentioned about each of these positions. Is the goalkeeper nailed on? Have they maybe got a DP slot open up that they could bring in a major player, a major acquisition that would maybe take set pieces away from an existing player in the squad, and then be ready to roll with the punches throughout the transfer market as other players start to move and transfer around. Now, when it comes to the in-season allotment of MLS cards when they come out, there is a huge opportunity here if you've identified a few of those clubs that you are going to tap into, that you're going to lean into, to buy squad players off the bat. Because when early access comes out and everyone rushes to buy the starting goalkeeper, the nailed defenders, the main midfielders, the power forwards or whatever, so many of those guys that are expected to be on the bench, expected to be in the squad, are going to go very, very cheap. And I have seen it every year in MLS, that a player, either within an individual squad or if you look at the league as a whole, rises out of nowhere and becomes one of the most dominant defenders for like a month or two, or becomes a contender to be top goal scorer, a contender for the All-Star team, a contender to be MVP towards the back end of the league. And if you've identified a squad that could do really, really well this year, there is a significant chance that an unexpected hero is going to rise through the ranks. And although stacking into one club in MLS to play the Challenger region, or if MLS did get its own in-season thing, is definitely not the best strategy to go with, because like we've mentioned already, like there's such a split in quality, or such a a wide variety of different DPs you could bring in from different squads. The optimal strategy would be to have a team of DPs, a guy from different club that all take set pieces and rotate them in on fixtures and form and all that kind of thing as well. But with so many players, like I say, that will shock you, that will come out of nowhere, if you can look at the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference and think, do you know what, well, that team is going to qualify for the playoffs, that team is generally a top 3, top 4 standing team, then getting in-season copies of maybe even just some of the likely squad players to emerge through the ranks is an edge that so many Sorare players on a budget have enjoyed over the last couple of years, whether it be by design or by accident. But with the way the collection game goes as well, like if you're looking at LAFC and you want to bring in a Denny Buanga, then see buying like 8 of the players in LAFC that might break into the team, have got a good reputation coming out of the youth academy and all that kind of thing. They will help your Denny Buanga be even more powerful by getting him some extra collection points to bang a little bit harder. And then in kind, if any of those guys were to rise through the ranks, they will also enjoy in on that. So it's not really about stacking the squad, but it's looking at who will be my key player this year. My key captain is going to be Denny Buanga at LAFC or whatever it might be, Tillman, whoever. And it's not just about buying random squad players, but it's ideating the ones that you like, the ones that you think could make it into the team that were maybe hard done to last year, unlucky with form, or just signed and they're breaking through the team. And if you were to do that with 2 or 3 clubs, you end up with 2 or 3 different captain-capable guys, like a Buanga, a Messi, let's just say Gold, because I'm a big Gold fan and whatever. And then each of them will have their own little subsidiary players in the collection that could be a very valuable defender card for you, could be a very valuable extra forward card to bring into your third lineup because somebody's suspended or got a bad game and all the rest of it. And MLS is, especially when it comes to Sorare, you need to be flexible, you need to be agile and be able to see that guy who's captain, that Denny Buanga, he's injured for a month. That sort of thing derails so many Sorare strategies. So you need to kind of have your bets hedged that, hey, Buanga, if he's got a great game, he's in Team 1. But if he doesn't, or if something terrible happens, suspension or injury or whatever, it's not too big of a deal because Gold can take that spot. And MLS really does lend itself to multi-entry because really, like, if you've got the budget, the best thing to do, like I've already mentioned, is just go across all the teams, get all the DPs in, get the top 5 goalkeepers, fill in collection pieces for then extra spots in the squad, your SO5 extra spot, and nondescript defenders, try and find who's the power centre-back with a good game this game week. But not all of us have the budget to run across 30 clubs and go and buy their biggest and most highly paid players and, build little collection pieces around it, which is why I kind of said, like, for most people, try and focus your attention, try and focus your efforts on, like, as I look at the league here, like, Portland generally are a club that do very, very well, and they finished this season pretty poor, 11 losses, 11 draws, 12 wins, very kind of bang average. Portland, just as an example, I'm not saying this will happen, but they are in theory a club that very easily could push that win column from 12 to 16. And that might not sound like a big difference, right? But they jump up the league. They're then, where are they getting those losses from? Those wins from? They're taking a few off the loss category. They're maybe taking a few off the draw category. Those are then games that the players have played better in. The captain hits a bit higher. There's an extra 100 or an extra 2 100s on his scoring profile for the season. And yeah, it just makes them an overall better proposition, So you can maybe ID some clubs that maybe underperformed or maybe, could have done a little bit better. Maybe they had good back-of-season form or the beginning of the season killed them. There's a number of different things that goes on here. But the number one thing I want you to take out of this video is you will be mental. You would be crazy. You would be mad to go and buy an MLS squad today at point of recording. We're in December, before the transfers start to ramp up and you start to see what players come in, before we actually get squad lists, before we get the fixture list announced, and before the end of the registration window, because MLS will break your heart on a number of different levels, but it can be a fantastic entry point because there is so many of these players that we spoke about in the good sense, the power players across the division. None of them are cheap, don't get me wrong, but they don't need to be as expensive as we see some of the European contemporaries being, like the boss guy in the Belgian league or the Dutch league or whatever it might be, the Portuguese league just running riot and being so much more expensive than second or third best. MLS has got such a broad spectrum of talent in that regard that it doesn't need to be that expensive to get in on them. And so many Sorare scouts and managers starting out, being around the block once or twice or whatever, really do get phenomenal results out of MLS, because if you can tap into this league, it is very much a knowledge is edge league. If you know that RSL always do bad away to this certain team, or although this guy, his SO5 score has been L5, is averaging around 48, but you've watched the match and you can see, well, do you know what? A goal get chopped off, or that guy missed a sitter, or he only get 80 minutes, or only get 60 minutes in that game, but I can actually see that his performances are getting better. And this game, they're at home against bottom of the table, blah, 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 blah. He's the guy who's going into my team. Knowledge, watching the games, makes a big difference in MLS. No two ways about it. And with the Apple TV subscription, or the Apple TV deal that they did with Messi's arrival, it's never been easier to plug into MLS, even if you live in a different time zone and you can't watch the games live. The packages, the coverage that they do on Apple TV is absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't really cost that much either. And if you are a European or non-American and you're looking to play this throughout the summer, it can make the summer a lot more interesting as well. I hope you've enjoyed this one, guys. I'm looking forward to catching the comment section on this one to see what your top tips are, what the Sorare veterans in the comment section have had to say about the video and any contributions they've added to it. If you are brand new to Sorare, I hope you enjoyed this as well, and hopefully it helped. On screen and now some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Stay out of trouble, and I will catch you on the next one.